I went to Jordan for a week. This is a country in the Middle East, surrounded by countries that you probably know the names of, and that you likely wouldn't want to visit quite so much. Jordan itself, though, is a brilliant country. Thanks to good leadership, it has managed to avoid conflict, and is regarded as a very safe place to travel to. It relies quite heavily on tourism, so I think it's in the country's best interest to keep it that way. I always worry before I visit a place. What if I do something wrong and offend everyone? But I needn't have feared. Jordan is the friendliest place I have ever visited, and at no point did I feel at all threatened by anybody. There are some places I've been where I feel like everybody wants my money, but not here. You're expected to haggle, otherwise you will be ripped off by stuff like taxi prices. They'll say $5 Jordanian. You say 2. They look all offended, but then eventually are like, okay. Being me, I felt rude, especially since I have the money to pay full price. But at the same time, I don't want to be a ripped off tourist who will end up raising the prices for everybody else. Supermarkets are actually really small things with a selection of crisps and chocolate. They don't have prices listed. You find out what things cost at the till.
Mineral water.
Sometimes we felt the prices were unreasonable and ended up haggling the prices down. It felt weird to do that in a shop, but who wants to spend $1.50 on water when elsewhere it can be had for 50 cents? Some parts of the country are very touristy, like Petra, but others not so much, and when in local places we get a lot of looks from people who are just curious. Especially when visiting restaurants, children in particular would stare, only to look away nervously whenever we return the favour. Jordan's capital city, Amman, is a confusing place. For a start, my phone's GPS location is all but broken. Second, many of the roads are a bit curved, so you end up heading in the wrong direction. Third, most place names are in Arabic squiggles, so it's difficult to find shop names to figure out where you are. And fourth, it appears there's a fine line between what's deemed worthy of a street on Google Maps and what doesn't get included. So you might think that you're looking for the 4th left, but in actual fact it's the 9th and 3/4. But you know what? I'd rather be lost in Amman than I would be in, say, New York. Everyone we met was friendly. If you ask a question, they will go out of their way to help you, even if they speak very limited English. When lost in the market district, one shop owner even shared with us his mobile hotspot. People say hi, some strike up conversation, I think, just to practice their English. And I can say that while the bustle of the capital was overwhelming on the first night, by the end of our trip, we felt right at home. It's a Muslim country. I haven't been to many before, and it does have a different feel to it. There are mosques everywhere, and they're kitted out with loudspeakers which will kick into action regularly, day and night. It's not pre-recorded either. You can hear them pick up the microphone, clear their throat, and then begin their chanting. Although I don't have a clue what is being said, I grew quite fond of it, and it made me feel like I was somewhere other than home. It's a man's world in Jordan. I travelled with my girlfriend, but I was expected to go everywhere first. I was handed things first. To visit a mosque, a woman would have to cover herself, while I didn't have to. Whenever we used a taxi, my girlfriend would have to sit in the back. I got a certain satisfaction from this, but I don't think she was quite so keen, and honestly, since she was the one who organised everything and knew what we were doing and where we wanted to go, it wasn't always very convenient. We had an interesting discussion with one taxi driver about women's rights. He considered them to have equal rights, the only issue being that a woman shouldn't speak with a man other than her husband in certain situations. So although a woman is allowed to drive, she shouldn't do it alone just in case she breaks down and needs a man's assistance to get her on her way again. You decide what you think about that. Women are covered. I would say I only saw about a dozen women in full niqab clothing, but almost everyone wore a hijab. Out of respect, we wore long clothing at all times. And it's funny, by the end, if I spotted a tourist in short shorts and a revealing top, I got kind of offended by it. They stand out like a sore thumb. I was quite fond of wearing all white. I thought it made me look a bit like Lawrence of Arabia, but it might have just made me look like the biggest tourist ever. It is a place with mosquitoes. I required a few injections a month before travelling and ended up walking around with sore arms for a few days. Once in Jordan, we cautiously plastered ourselves in DEET the first day and used netting over the beds for our first night, but after that, got a feel for the place and didn't bother. We only got a couple of bites throughout the trip and it wasn't bad at all. Even in Aqaba, the clubbing town of Jordan, which is apparently the worst place for mosquitoes. You will need sunglasses. I have never been anywhere so bright in all my life. I am not a shade wearer, but everything there's so shiny and chrome, you either wear them or are reduced to continually squinting and hating life. Bring glasses. It's best to avoid salads and to stick to bottled water in a place like Jordan. I'll admit, a few times I did accidentally have salady things, then worried that I'd go down with food poisoning, but I managed to remain healthy. The bottled water was more of a problem though. I'm a real cheapskate. Some places charge $2 for a bottle of water. Knowing that 1.5 litres can be had for 50 cents, I'd stock up whenever I could, even if it meant stubbornly lugging 6 litres of water about with me around Petra all day. For the first half of the holiday, I really didn't drink enough. I'd rarely pee, would forever be rationing it out, and would spend the night with a dry mouth and a headache. By the end, I was a changed man, remaining hydrated and drinking water even when I didn't feel thirsty. I suggest you do the same when you're out there. It's really not worth being frugal when it comes to something like water in a hot country. When I went in early October, the temperature was somewhere between 25 and 35 degrees each day, depending on where we were. I noticed this country doesn't use much air conditioning, maybe because they're used to it being hotter than that in the summer, but even though our rooms generally came with the air conditioning, we ended up not using it. Simply sleep naked without covers on and it's fine. Just the way I like it anyway. It had barely rained for 7 months when we got there, but sure enough, the last day we got caught in a storm. The hotels we stayed in were about $20 a night. We chose central locations since we did want to walk to most places, but taxis are everywhere if you'd rather. Again, I'm talking about central Amman here. I will warn you that they don't care about pavements out there. They'll park on them, will place stuff on them, dump grit on them. It's a nightmare to trundle bags over them. It really makes me appreciate the pavements we have in England. Also, it's rather loud out there. People beep their horns seemingly for no reason. Car horns are loud, vans are louder, and trucks are the worst. I felt there was some kind of conspiracy where they'd wait until they were alongside you before blasting their horn. I'm pretty sure I've sustained some hearing loss from the continual barrage my poor eardrums received out there. Of course, some of these horns are from taxi drivers looking for business. Even at 6 in the morning, you'd have no problem flagging down a taxi if you really would like to get somewhere. Some of them can be pushy, especially at bus stations. They'll chase you for several streets and won't take no for an answer. It can be overbearing, to the point where we instead chose to walk for 40 minutes, simply out of spite. I was the one carrying the bags. So what is there to do in Jordan? There are many ruins and landmarks that we went to, but honestly, Petra spoiled us by being the best by far. For logistical reasons, we did Petra early on, but it did mean that we took the castles and ruins we saw afterwards somewhat for granted. The other highlight was the Wadi Desert. Both of these things I would like to make separate videos about, since there's a lot to say about both. The third thing I suggest doing is the Dead Sea. That's the floaty one. It's actually a large lake that's been dried out so much that it's now 400 meters below sea level. It's the lowest point on Earth. Being so low down, this was the hottest bit of Jordan by far, and even I, someone who hates water, was happy to go for a swim. At the time, I didn't even think about the water's temperature, but it was warm. I wouldn't even say lukewarm. It was proper bath temperature in the Dead Sea. Far hotter than the resort swimming pools were. It was brilliant. Even better than I expected. It doesn't feel any different as you're getting into it, but once you start floating, you feel like you've suddenly gotten very good at swimming. It's a bit of a shock to return to normal bodies of water. There's something wrong with me. While everybody else is blissfully floating around, I sink like a stone in normal water. Annoyingly, people say it's because I'm not relaxing or whatever, but as soon as I relax, I'm off at high speed to meet Davy Jones. Maybe I'm just doing something really wrong. But so far, the only way I've found to stay afloat is to hold my breath while kicking all my limbs like crazy. It's very tiring for me. I can't even tread water without shooting very quickly down the Z-axis. And yet, even I float in the Dead Sea. It's a lovely feeling. I did a little compilation of different moves that I don't think are possible anywhere else in the world. You can have all 4 limbs and your head out of the water at the same time. Being a sinky stone kind of guy, at points I'd look down and imagine what would happen if it suddenly changed back to normal water again. But luckily for me it didn't. The Dead Sea gets 2 thumbs up from me, which is possible even while swimming in it. Just don't get it in your eyes. There's so much salt in the Dead Sea that it will sting like hell if it gets into a cut. Even your mouth isn't recommended. It's even a bit uncomfortable down the end of your dick. Stop! Apparently you shouldn't spend more than 20 minutes in the water or else osmosis will happen, or something. I think we were down and around the water for about an hour. Time really flew and I was sorry to say goodbye. The sun was really fierce and I didn't want to get sunburnt. But then I guess, being 400 meters below sea level, you're actually better protected there than you are normally. I don't think you can just go down to the Dead Sea. Apparently some bits aren't safe or clean, so instead you go to a resort. Even if this wasn't the case, I suggest you do because you'll really want a shower afterwards. Rub your fingers whilst they're wet and it almost feels like they're greasy. Even after several showers and a swim in a normal pool, my skin felt weird. I don't think the Dead Sea could be that good for you. It is called the Dead Sea after all. It's surreal to see salt crystals coating the rocks. I was careful when entering and leaving the pool since I knew that cutting myself would hurt like crazy. but for some reason a lot of the rocks were unaffected and were smooth to step on. Just be careful of your electronics. Salt isn't good for them. I unfortunately forgot about this and asked some people if they could take pictures of us while we were in the water. Since they had just gotten out, their salt-laden fingers went all over my camera. I can now hear the salt grinding away whenever I manually focus it. So apart from that, that was another highlight of Jordan. My last one was somewhat unexpected. We were visiting ruins and castles, which, as I've said already, is a bit boring if you've already been to Petra. We were at a place where they used to weave baskets hundreds of years ago or something. I almost got into trouble here because while I was waiting for my girlfriend to come out of the toilets, I absent-mindedly started looking through pictures I had taken on my camera through its viewfinder, only to notice a man next to me giving me nasty looks. I quickly realised it looked like I was taking pictures straight into the women's toilets. Embarrassed, I got away from there and came across this view. That there is Israel. And there is Syria. I guess I hadn't really thought about it until then, but it was a bit strange just to be able to look across at a country in the midst of a civil war. It's not like there were aircraft roaring overhead or huge checkpoints and barriers to separate the countries. Syria was just chilling there, the next hill along. It looked the same as where I stood. I think in that moment, I learned a lot. Before I come to Jordan, I thought it might have been dangerous. And now here I was, looking right across at Israel and Syria, thinking that they looked peaceful and inviting. Of course, you can also see Israel across the Dead Sea, and we were just miles away from Egypt when in Aqaba. I'm close to Saudi Arabia when in the desert. I've come a long way. I remember when I first saw Scotland and thought I was being adventurous. Yet here I am, a few months later. And that's a Philip guide to Jordan. Like most places I visit, I didn't know much about it before I went. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as when I saw Yosemite or the Grand Canyon. But you know what? This was better. It might even have been my favourite holiday ever. Even if I spent most of it exhausted, thirsty and sleep deprived. It's bittersweet that it's yet another part of the world that will never be a mystery to me again.